Hey friends, thank you for clicking on this video and joining in on what is a continuing conversation. And yes, the title is letting everybody know I'm still talking about my .36 caliber long gun. And I've had some pretty lengthy conversations with my friend Broken Feather, trying to resolve what might be the issue with this gun. And before I get into all of that, I also want to address a couple comments under these videos that I think would benefit everybody. And having part of this conversation with my friend Broken Feather, I've adjusted my thinking about things, especially this modern day. Okay, so I want to bring into the context a comment from Bubba Grunt regarding my personal feelings of spit patch and pre-lubed patches, because he's shooting with some older fellers that make the comment seasoning in your gun barrel. You don't want to take the seasoning out. Well, I used to think the same way, okay? And in fact, there was a fella that did a video sometime back testing using Dawn dishwashing detergent and water as a patch lube. I think I turned a couple shades grayer when I read that thumbnail, because I don't watch this fella's videos. So then I sat down and did a video explaining that you don't want to use the detergent in your gun barrels because it takes the seasoning out, just like you don't want to use a detergent cleaning your cast iron because it takes the seasoning out of your cast iron pans. But in reality, what does that mean? We don't live this day and age with that type of knowledge per se, just simply because back in the day, and I'm going to use the number 100 years ago just to show a length of time. 100 years ago, if you washed your cast iron with a detergent and it took out the seasoning, it may have been a little problematic to re-season your cast iron. Okay, today you clean your cast iron with a detergent and you take the seasoning out. Well, what does that entail today? Well, you just put a little bit of oil in your cast iron, set your oven to 150 degrees perhaps, and set it in there for 1 hour, and voila! It's re-seasoned. It's not that big of a deal, is it? So I adjusted my thinking about that. And in fact, like when I roast coffee beans at a rendezvous, the oils that comes off of the coffee beans, and I use a steel pan. I don't use cast iron. I use a steel pan for that. Those oils are embedding themselves right into that steel. But I don't wash it with a detergent. I just simply wipe it out and she's good to go. Eggs may taste like coffee, but hey, who cares, right? So this day and age, older information is not necessarily bad, but you got to ask, is it applicable? So, using a spit patch versus a pre-lube patch, Bubba Grunt, it's up to you. Experiment with both for a while and see which one serves your interests the best. I have to go to a spit patch just simply because my rifles are coned, and when I first coned them, I noticed that my point of impact was varying a little bit because of an oil pre-lube patch, because when that fire from the explosion of the gunpowder got to that void, it was kind of like surrounding the patch and really burning the patches. But as I've been demonstrating now with my homemade gunpowder, my patches are burning through even with a spit patch, but I'm still hitting the point of aim. I should be trying pre-lube patches in my flintlock at this point and see what happens. Okay, so experiment with both. Now, another reason why I like using a spit patch, and in particular when I'm in a timed event, okay? When I'm in a timed event, it's a whole lot easier to have a few spit patches right here to quickly load your gun, whereas I've seen guys keep spit patches in a container like this, and they're in a timed event and they're fumbling around their pouches looking for the patch, looking for the box to get the patch, put it on top of the gun, take the time to put this back in their pouch, fumble around for a ball, and I've already shot and beat them because I use a spit patch. Look at the situation that you're with. Look at your gun in particular, and I'm going to really show you guys something here that frightened the bejesus out of me here, thinking I had this gun clean. Okay, but I'll get to that in a little bit. But this day and age, what does it really mean to have a seasoned barrel? If you're the type of muzzleloader shooter that goes out and shoots and comes home and lets your gun set for 3, 4, 5 days a week at a time, you don't need to be a muzzleloader shooter. Get rid of the gun. Because if you're going to shoot muzzleloaders, you have to take the responsibility of cleaning it. And that's why I've said, if I shoot it one time, you might as well shoot it multiple times. Because you're going to have to clean it. Because black powder is corrosive, so is 777, and so is Pyrodex. Any of those propellants that are a substitute for black powder are corrosive. They may not start corroding as quickly as, say, a black powder does, but they are still corrosive. So you want to come home and within a day at least to start cleaning that gun. And if you become too lazy with that and several years from now you decide to sell the gun and somebody drops a bore light and say, that bore's pretty bad pitted. You wanted how much for it? You wanted $400? Well, as badly pitted as that barrel, I'll give you $150 because it's pitted, because you did not take the responsibility of keeping your gun clean. Now, with that being said, in regarding a properly seasoned barrel, I'm guilty of it. I'll tell you right now, I am absolutely, literally guilty of that. But I've had to change my thinking because of this. When I get done shooting, I religiously clean my gun. In this day and age, we have so many products available to us that maybe weren't available to people 100 years ago, such as Ballistol, such as Hoppy's number 9, such as Cleanse Oil. Hell, there's even a video out there, somebody saying, oh, just use Windex. Well, it don't work for what I do because I've tried it. See, I was willing to try this very simple, cheap house cleaning product to clean my muzzleloader. It didn't work. And as you can see, I still got a shitload of it left. In fact, I think I even did a video out here in the shooting range showing this stuff doesn't work. So don't believe what everybody says. Try it out for yourself. So when it comes to spit patch versus pre-lubed, work with both of them and see what suits your needs the best. But pay attention to what you're doing during timed events, because having to reach in your pouch and pull out a little container with pre-lube patches because you can't put a spit patch here could very much cost you the match. Okay? So, knowledge that may have applied 100 years ago may not apply today. Okay? Now, with this conversation that I've been having with my friend Broken Feather, we've come to the agreement that there's a tight spot in this barrel. Okay? And then, Somebody in the comment section also suggested getting a bore scope. I've watched 100 videos of people with bore scopes going down a modern day rifle looking at all of the copper fouling left behind. So they'll show the copper fouling, they'll get their, you know, whatever cleaning solution they want to use to dissolve the copper fouling, and then they'll run the bore light back down there, and you see how pristine and clean it is. But because I've been a machinist, I still see the tooling marks left behind from the manufacturing process of the barrel. So in my mind, at least, I don't care how clean you think your barrel is, there's still tooling marks in there that could, and I'm not saying it will, but could affect your shooting ability. Okay, but I don't rest all of my talking points on that. Okay, so no matter how clean you think your barrel is from copper fouling, lead fouling, you still have tooling marks left behind from the machining. Now, getting to a point of there being a tight spot in the barrel. Yes, JB Compound can help smooth that out. I don't have that, but what I did instead, trying to work through this, I took some steel wool on my wire brush and I wrapped my wire brush very, very tightly. And I built, in fact, I went through 3 brand new 4/0 steel wool pads. I went through 3 of them. In an hour and a half, I spent trying to polish that barrel or do something with it. And there again, the barrel shoots. The barrel impacts where I need it to impact when I have the proper load and I'm not burning through my patches severely. So putting a rice barrel on this gun ain't gonna help because this one still serves me just fine. Okay? Like I've said, I can shoot 8, 10, 12 rounds with Pyrodex and not have a loading issue, but when I use black powder, I've got a loading issue. That's the problem. It's not the barrel. And if I'm going to spend money on buying a rice barrel, I'll just buy another whole new gun, which I'm not going to do. So anyhow, that comment's out of the way. LOL, right? All right. So after an hour and a half of doing this, I took some little bit of Blue Thunder on a patch and I wiped everything out, and I took my air compressor and then I blew everything out, run some dry patches, and I thought, you know what, I've been watching a few videos lately of guys making homemade bullet lube, but mainly for modern day bullets, not so much black powder. And there seemed to be a common ingredient in there to help cut the viscosity of oil, and that's mineral spirits. And I got a brand new container of mineral spirits sitting right up on my shelf. Now I clean my guns to the point to where I'm anal about it. And after running for an hour and a half or so, that steel wool down that barrel to try to polish it, I cleaned it with Blue Thunder. I thought, you know what? I'm going to run a patch of mineral spirits down this barrel and just see what comes out. I about fell over. I know this is the patch because it still smells like mineral spirits. That's the patch. I about fell over. So I mentioned this to my friend. Well, let me get to the second point first before I get to explaining this to my friend Broken Feather. That's the patch. And I thought I had a clean barrel because even when I got done with the last shooting session, I cleaned it with Murphy's oil soap, hydrogen peroxide, and rubbing alcohol. That's what I've used for years. It's what I've used in this gun. But yet, that's what that patch came out looking like in a barrel that I thought was religiously clean. So I took several more patches, dried it out, and get to the final patch, and it came out, you know, pretty clean, like what we normally determine as clean. You know, I'm going to try that again. Here's the second patch. And that's a cleaning after the first patch. So how clean are we really getting our guns? I about fell over when I saw the second patch also. Took a bunch more patches, dried it out. I took a third patch, and that third patch came out pristine. So I mentioned that to my friend Broken Feather, and he was wondering if it was some residual stuff left behind from the 4-aught steel wool. I thought maybe, like he did, there was a chemical reaction between the steel wool and the mineral spirits. So I took a container, put some mineral spirits in it, and I put steel wool in it for about 20 minutes, and there was no color, no color change or anything. I took it around, swirled it, tried to rub it on the side of the container to see if I couldn't get something to transfer from the steel wool into the container of mineral spirits. Nothing. Nothing at all. Then I thought, because I use a wire brush wrapped with jute twine, maybe it's the jute twine. So I did the same thing. Got a bunch of jute twine, put it in the container. In fact, it was so clean, I poured the mineral spirits back into the container because it was so clean. So I would like to have someone else, just for the shits and giggles of it, if you think your barrel is clean, soak a patch with mineral spirits and see what you get. Because I would be curious as to why this came out of my gun barrel when I know I religiously clean them. I would be real curious to see what some of you guys can find. Now, moving on to the commenter, Shooting Hill's observation. He's got a .36 caliber rifle, and he's experiencing a similar problem. Can only get a few things, a few shots downrange, and you're struggling to get the gun reloaded again. And I like what you came up with as a possible solution. He mentioned about putting a leather wad on top of the powder charge and then putting the ball, the patch round ball, on top of that. And as soon as I read that, I thought, wait a minute. Felt, pre-lubed felt wads. I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention again right here for context. I don't view these as a delivery system for lubing your gun barrel, especially your revolver. I view these as a gas check. So when I get out and shoot, I'm going to be using these between the powder charge and the patched round ball so that I can get that fire from that burning gunpowder off of the patch. Now, my friend William Broken Feather seems to think that I'm cutting the patches as I'm bringing them down the barrel, and I would definitely concur with that, but I would also add to the context that I think I'm burning it too, because if your patch is getting cut going down the barrel, then you're actually leaving a gap for your exploding black powder to get around. So I'm anxious, and thank you, Shooting Hill's observation, for making that comment, because I would have never ever thought to put a felt wad on top of that powder charge and have it act as a gas check. And if you guys, are interested, you can go over to my Etsy store, Lane Beaver Trading Company, and I've still got plenty of these things for sale. 31, 36, and 44 caliber, along with a whole bunch of other stuff that you may find useful in your black powder loading and shooting. Now that plugs over, right? Okay, so I am going to pause here for just a minute to go do a 40 grain test burn on a piece of plate glass so that I can use it in conjunction with something that I want to use as an example as to what I think might really be happening. Okay, there's 40 grains of Schutzen. If you can look at that powder the smoky residue, it's got multiple colors in it. Okay, you can see some lighter colors close to what's being left behind as what would be the black powder fouling, not the smoky residue. You can see that there's a color change. In my opinion, that's what's left behind from the graphite, because all of your commercial black powder makers coat their black powder with graphite. Okay, and I've shown the receipt from Swiss. They use a heavy graphite glazing. Okay, now I'm going to take my finger, and it's dry, and I'm going to rub it through what is just the smoky residue. Okay, that's the fouling that's left behind just in the smoky residue. Now granted, most of your smoke should be going forward of the barrel, but let me illustrate this and show you my perspective, okay? And I could be wrong about this. I don't know yet, but time will tell. This is the gun barrel. This red spot represents a 30 grain charge. The round ball and the ignition system. Now I'm sticking with a 30 grain charge for the context of this illustration because, well, old school knowledge. If you've got a 36 caliber gun, you should be shooting 36 grains. If you've got a 45 caliber gun, you should be shooting 45 grains. If you've got a 50 caliber gun, etc., etc., etc. That's old school knowledge, because today's gun barrels are a hell of a lot more stronger than they were 100 years ago. So that knowledge doesn't always necessarily apply. But because I employed that with this gun, I want to emphasize this, okay? So let's just say you ignite this 30 grains, and if you know how black powder burns, it's burning as it's pushing the unburnt powder down the barrel with the ball. That's how black powder works, okay? That's why you can burn a lot of black powder in your barrels and not get the amount, the pressure spikes that you can, say, like with a smokeless powder. So, as this 30 grain charge is burning, it's pushing the unburnt powder in the ball down the barrel. Now, being a 30 grain charge, a small charge, let's just say that 30 grain charge consumes itself about halfway down the barrel, maybe a little bit more. That smoke that's left behind the ball in this powder charge, where do you suppose most of that smoke might end up? Perhaps in the barrel, along with what is pushed out the front. You do that 2 or 3 times, and you've got a buildup of powder, not only in the front of the barrel, but also back here too. Granted, I would suggest and think that most of the powder, the fouling powder buildup, would be from this point forward. But when you go to reload, because you've got more smoky residue, and again, tell me what you think, because this is this is what I'm thinking right now. You've got more smoky residue from this point forward, because most of your smoky buildup of residue has already been consumed with a small charge of powder. That's why sometimes I think what I'm doing is I'm pushing more residue, smoky residue, down that barrel, and it stops at a certain point, because with a patch round ball, you're only going to be able to push so much of that smoky residue, especially after the second, third, or fourth shot, because that residue is building up and the spit patch ain't cutting it. That's as simple as that. It's just not cutting it, and neither did the Blue Thunder. And is that because there's more smoky residue in the barrel than, say, like with a 45 grain charge? Because now as you're burning, you're pushing, burning, pushing, burning, pushing, burning, pushing, and you've consumed that 45 grain charge up here, and you've got less powder, less fouling to push down that barrel. Just tell me what you think. Because obviously, on these small caliber rifles, I'm not the only one experiencing having, cleaning issues. But there again, at a rendezvous, that could be time consuming. After 3-4 shots, run a patch run. And I've seen guys do it. Believe me, I've seen guys do it, but I'm just not one to do that. I'm just not. And I've seen guys like myself run the entire match without having to brush it once, but I'm also shooting a much larger caliber gun with a much more larger powder charge. So as it's burning down that barrel, pushing, it's still burning, but by the time you get to the end of the barrel, it's already consumed by the time you get to the barrel, and you're pushing that smoke out just by the energy that's driving everything forward. And with a smaller barrel gun in a small charge, how much energy is left behind to push that ball from this point here? Because I've even heard it said that if you consume all your gunpowder inside the barrel, your ball starts slowing down immediately. I don't know whether that saying is true or not. I really don't care, because I'm not concerned about that. Just simply because if that little 36 caliber round ball with a 40 grain charge is getting 1,600 feet a second, if that ball starts slowing down to 1,599 feet, which one of those two numbers makes you more dead? So for me, putting stuff like that into this context is completely irrelevant. It really, really is. Now I'm going to show you what I've done, and I've explained it already. Because I'm of this mind right here, right now, I'm going to bump my charges up to 45 grains. Okay? And what I did is I weighed out, well, first I put it in my powder measure, and I put it at about what I thought was 45 with Schutz and 3F. And I put it in the scale, my balance scale, and I had to add just a little bit more to make it be 45 grains by weight. I poured that into this powder measure. This is static, it's not settled. This is static. And then I drilled out this to accept 45 grains by weight of my homemade black powder. Now in this test, I'm going to be using my peanut shell, because my peanut shell is one of my cleaner burning gunpowders, along with mullein and my pistachio shell. But I got quite a bit of this left for this test. And because I'm going to be shooting a 45 grain charge, I'm hoping that by the time that charge is burning and still pushing the ball, that by the time it gets close to the end of the barrel, I'll have less fouling inside the barrel. And I mean smoky residue inside the barrel. So what I'm going to do now, in conclusion, I'm going to go clean this off. And yes, I'm using that Windex. I found a purpose for it. And we'll kind of take a look. So get a good look of what the Schutzen is right here. And as you can see, that fouling is very much stuck to the glass. So I'm going to go burn 40 grains, not 45, but 40 grains. And so if you remember what this looks like, because I'm going to clean this, and then we'll look at the smoky residue and the burn comparison with the peanut shell. Well, that was a little surprising. This didn't clean the glass as well as I thought it would have. It left streaks behind. But that might have been just because I was trying to clean residue from black powder, which we know is dirty. All right. There's a 40 grain burn of my peanut shell. And if you can compare, you see there's not as much fouling from the black powder left behind in that line. Yeah, there's a smoky residue, but the whites of the smoky residue are where? On the outer edges, not close to the burn, because I'm not using graphite. Because graphite does become an explosive in powder form. Alright, so take a look at that. Run my finger through it, about like what I did the last time. And yes, there's fouling on it from the smoky residue. So, if I am leaving more than an unusual amount of smoky residue in that barrel because of a small powder charge, then I would expect subsequent loads to be more difficult to load, because now you're trying to push a patched round ball through a buildup of the smoky residue, which on a larger charge should be blown out the front of the barrel. That's what I think about that, is as to an explanation of what might be happening. So I wanted to do this video just simply because you can see how long this is into the context. So when I get ready to get out and shoot after the next couple of days, when the wind finally dies down, I can just get out and do the shooting, and we can observe for ourselves if these wads, gas checks, might help this situation out a little bit, in conjunction with a little bit more powder, and allowing that charge to burn further down the barrel and leaving less smoky residue inside the barrel. So we'll find that out together. If you found this information of benefit, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your bestest of friends. And depending on the timing of everything, hope everybody will have a Merry Christmas. And we'll catch you in the shooting video itself. Bye.